Namaste and good evening. So, last time we finished 25 sessions of our Kala Evam Adhyatm series. So, it's really a pleasure to welcome everyone for the 26th edition of our Kala Evam Adhyatm series, jointly organized by Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, SAILC at Auro University, and Renaissance Journal at Sri Aurobindo Society. And today we go into poetry and literature again with Gayatri Majumdar, Miss Gayatri Majumdar. And it's really my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and colleague from Sri Aurobindo Society, Gayatri Majumdar, who wears many hats as poet, publisher, editor, of course, writing prose as well. She's the author of 7 books, which include 4 poetry collections. And I'm hoping we'll hear a little bit more about them as she shares in her presentation with us. Then she's also a curator of the increasingly popular Pondicherry Auroville Poetry Festival, which she's been doing that for several years now. And as I said, she's part of Sri Aurobindo Society's Auro publications, which is the publications wing of Sri Aurobindo Society, where she does a lot of work with editing and various other things related to publication of books. I myself know that because she's edited a couple of my books, and she is also associated and a regular writer and curator for Sri Aurobindo's Action in Pondicherry, another institution started by the mother. So really welcome, Gayatri. And today she's going to speak a little bit about Sri Aurobindo's poetry and how it spanned through various phases of his life and how it has inspired and influenced her work as a poet. So welcome, Gayatri. Please, the forum is all yours.
Thank you so much, Belu, and very happy to be here this evening. And thank you for joining us, all of you. I have to thank you, Dr. Belu Mehra and Dr. Kiran Singh, Kiran Singh, for having me present this session, which is really very dear to my heart. And I appreciate that you, Belu, give me so much, so many opportunities to present Sri Aurobindo's poetry on various forums. So I'll begin with from slide 1 with a quote from Sri Aurobindo about basically his vision of what art is. And Sri Aurobindo says that art can never really find what it seeks or succeed in liberating its soul in the highest perfection of speech unless it transfuses the rhythms of its exquisite moods into a sustained spiritual experience. So it's pretty well known and obvious that the mystic theme is the main and only theme, basically, of Sri Aurobindo's poetry, as far as his poetry is concerned. Of course, he's written on various subjects as well, but this is really the main theme. And according to him, the poet is not guided by man-made rules and creeds, but by the rules of nature. In other words, to say, he is governed not by his flesh, but by his soul. And it means that he has transcended worldly matters and becomes a total devotee to God. In Sri Aurobindo's own words, the native power of poetry is in its sight, and the poetic vision of life is not a critical or intellectual or philosophical view of it, but a soul view, a seizing by the inner sense. And the poetic climax is in its substance and form, the rhythmic revelation or intuition arising out of the soul's sight. So this is what really draws me, to his poems, and I'm able to access this, what he calls the soul's view, very directly when I read his poems. There are no distractions or interference. It's a direct connection that he, takes us where he calls seizing of the inner sense, the soul side. For we know that he's written so much, but according to me and for me, it is through his poems and poetry that I get this absolutely direct flight to that realm which he's, talking about. So I'm grateful for all that he's written. And before I would like you and Satya to read a couple of poems, before that, I'll just also mention that in his later formulations of the aesthetic theory of poetry in the ashram in the 1930s, in his overhead aesthesis, Sri Aurobindo describes 4 planes from where the poetic inspiration can arise: higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, and overmind, the last of which is the birthplace of the inspired and inevitable word, carrying with it the strongest mantric power. So as we know, he's written a series, the Arya series of the future poetry. And again, he speaks the essential power of the poetic words. So to illustrate this, may we request Dr. Mehra, because I wanted to make this session a little interactive. So if you could play the video where you read Because Thou Art, one of his most beloved poems.
So, Because Thou Art, right? That's what we are playing now.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll just also say that he also talks about these 3 intensities of poetic expression of the deepest spiritual reality. These become possible when they meet and become indissolubly one: a highest intensity of rhythmic movement, a highest intensity of interwoven verbal form and thought substance of style, and a highest intensity of the soul's vision of truth. And he says all great poetry is about a union of these 3 elements. So I was hoping that we can either play, Malcolm Boyer's Krishna or...
Okay. Let me see which one
is available.
Yeah. Okay, let me see which one. No, this is not what you wanted to see. Now I think I have forgotten. Wait a minute. Just, okay. Video details. Yes, I found the screen.
Okay.
Wait. Yes, I found the one. Okay, can you see something on the screen so I can play?
Yes, you can increase the...
Yeah.
Because Thou Art by Sri Aurobindo. Because Thou art all beauty and all bliss, my soul, blind and enamored, yearns for Thee. It bears Thy mystic touch in all that is, and thrills with the burden of that ecstasy. Behind all eyes, I meet Thy secret gaze, and in each voice I hear Thy magic tune. Thy sweetness hunts my heart through nature's ways. Nowhere it beats now from Thy snare immune. It loves thy body in all living things. Thy joy is there in every leaf and stone. The moments bring thee on their fiery wings. Sight's endless artistry is thou alone. Time voyages with thee upon its prow, and all the future's passionate hope is thou.
Such a beautiful video rendition. Thank you, Belu, for that. If possible, we can also listen to Malcolm.
Yes, okay.
Or
Yeah. So that's easier to do it. You can see the screen, right? Shall I play?
yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is the poem Krishna, correct?
Yes, Krishna by Malcolm Boyd.
Krishna. At last, I find a meaning of soul's birth into this universe, terrible and sweet. I, who have felt the hungry heart of earth, aspiring beyond heaven to Krishna's feet. I have seen the beauty of immortal eyes, and heard the passion of the lover's flute, and known a deathless ecstasy's surprise, and sorrow in my heart forever mute. Nearer and nearer now, the music draws, life shudders with a strange felicity. All nature is a wide, enamored pause, hoping her Lord to touch, to clasp, to be. For this one moment lived the ages past. The world now throbs, fulfilled in me at last.
Yes, really phenomenal the way he renders this poem. So I'll move on to my poetic journey, which I started many, many decades ago, I think. And so I arrived here. There are a couple of slides which can be just shown a little bit. In those past years, I've been bringing out a magazine called The Brown Critique, for a couple of decades, more than 2 decades in Mumbai and Kolkata. And suddenly, I found myself in Pondicherry in 2015. And all through that phase, I've had only one book published, one book of poems. That's the first one in 2000. And then suddenly when I'm in Pondicherry in 2015, there happened 6 more books, and there's more coming. So it is something to do with the inner and outer, what is inside gets reflected outside, something about the miracles that keep happening, like an everyday occurrence in Pondicherry. So I am really grateful for that. And these are some of my books. I'll read a couple of poems because of, time constraint. And Beluji, if you move on, yes. So these are the books which are available. As I said, all of them have been published. There is one home anthology post-pandemic that we brought out, and the others are poetry. So definitely my poetry and poems, how I express myself, has definitely shifted. There's a definitive, change in perspective, because it comes, I guess, from somewhere within, and there is always the stepping back, reflection. There is no cause or reason anymore to, fight the world in a sense, or but there is also, in my poem, which I'll read very recently, some of the poems which have been published. And the first one is going to be part of my new book, which is coming out this year, called A Warm Place Without Memory. And this is called To Be. I thought I'll read that one because the name itself is inspired by the mother. To Be That Is Perfect is the poem that is I'm going to read. White spider chrysanthemum against a lavender evening, with a hint of fire, a whirling dervish overhead, the cat pretend nap on the mora, short-eared owls landing noiseless. The eerie chime from Swarim inevitably skips several beats of my heart hanging on the wall. Assorted gods typically whisper mostly to the dead, and at the soul's entrance, no allotted number or even sidekicks. Someone somewhere is hurting still, red with ravishing colors, a tombstone for a head, tuberoses, Italian asters, lilies, peace in the belly, simple sincerity. The azure within, with a wisp of ether white, the Mayana perching on the highest branch nods. This conversation is about to commence. Saying old over several lifetimes, habitual deliriums ending with nothing. Phantasmal, ruminative, still, what can I say? Did I say this all means so much to me? I meant to, at best, be. So this is the poem. I wanted to read another poem which was published in The Direct Path, which is Ramana Kendra, Ramana Maharishi's magazine, but it's a little long, so I'll skip that. I'll read My Little Magpie Robin, which was brought out in Sri Aurobindo's Action, which I'm associated with right now. And this again has, and the issue was on patience. So there is again a definitive shift that I find in the way I express myself. So this is called My Little Magpie Robin. That time, many moons ago, and I cannot remember exactly when, I wanted so much to flower. There wasn't any particular color or fragrance I had in mind. Anyway, it was so many moons ago, and I can't remember when. But I arrived a tad late, and no one brought me a flower dress which fit. Saying nothing, I sat on the hurting side of the fence. No tears welling, and the mother whispered, wait. The little magpie robin will take with her light patterns to your end of days. Her sweet cries will pierce your pain, and remember, you would have flowered again. My palm petaling pink petals, deadwood, sloughing memories of tall trees and of a bud's uncertain ascent from your silly heart's callousness and deep philosophies, striving to sky, sea, and unblue sun. mix with aromas of coffee and fresh mint, little green fish, yellow dragonflies, dark halves of moons, ship horns, Mars eyes. And your little magpie robin remains nonchalant, ripping apart precious things, battle cries, starry eyes welling, castaways, with her relentless whistling. Then I thought I heard, nothing here is left behind, nothing taken. And behind the sun's shadow, when she darts around my breeze and salt-rimmed emptiness, your pink will raise its head above the torn silences, the heavy sighs of days, when you become the song. Again, your little magpie robin sings. So this is my next offering, and the final little bit I'll read. It is more of a prose poem. It's not really exactly a poem, but poetic in nature. And it was also published in Sri Aurobindo's Action in the most recent issue. And it's called The Alchemy of Pain. I'll just read a couple of excerpts because it's a little long. And this issue was on solicitude. The beginning of each excerpt that I wrote begins with a little mother's quote, and then it follows, my writing follows. Mother's quote. When in your life you meet with a hardship, take it as a grace from the Lord, and indeed it will become so, the mother. When you're convinced you're totally abandoned, left quite alone, that becomes the most precious moment of your life when you're found. You stand at the edge of life's vagaries, absolutely helpless, as you look up teary-eyed at the waxing full moon, the dark waters gently lapping, silvering around your feet, listening to the distant gasping of last goodbyes of someone you dearly love, that ship merging with the horizon, is when you're both held up. The moon's light gracing flowers and bridges, gurgling streams, ancient monuments, the sweet murmurs of your heart. Its light shines on the quiet love in you, the ending of days, and determined bees gather honey and messages from other dimensions. So that is one excerpt. I'll just read another one. Again, I'll begin with the mother's quote. The grace is something that pushes you towards the goal to be attained. Do not try to judge it by your mind. You will not get anywhere because it is something formidable which is not explained through human words or feelings. When the grace acts, the result may or may not be pleasant. It takes no account of any human value. It may even be a catastrophe from the ordinary and superficial point of view, but it is always the best for the individual. It is a blow that the divine sends so that progress may be made by leaps and bounds. The grace is that which makes you march swiftly towards the realization. My writing. When you do not know how to even express how things have gone wrong, and that you know you can never be whole again, your heart drumming in your ear, the mirror distorted and broken in places, then she may even consider dragging you out. You will swim in that sea of sorrow, even while gasping for breath, and she, even while watching you grapple with everything that's impossible, gently point to the direction of joy and relief. She will whisper, but her words will resound. She was always with you. You were just unaware of it. She never left you. How could she? You were her special child, a bright star with dreamy eyes wearing a crown of thorns, with unparalleled aspiration and the deepest sincerity. Thank you so much for listening. So these are the two little things that I wanted to share with you. That's my poetic journey, and for which, again, I'm very grateful, again, to you, Belu. And I'll again shift again back to our master. And I'll talk about some major themes in Sri Aurobindo's poetry. And we've been working on a book compiled and edited by Dr. Alok Pandey. And so I thought I will just, talk a little bit about the different phases of Sri Aurobindo's life, because this book that Dr. Pandey brought out encapsulates, the various stages of his lives. And I haven't even included all of them, but there is the revolutionary yogi period in which Sri Aurobindo had a number of inner experiences. And then the grand culmination of this period was the realization of the nirvana and the vision of the one divine everywhere. So these are, what Dr. Pandey did was segregate the different, which I've picked up, different aspects of his life, and then added some poems. And we plan to bring Auro Publications kind of abridged version of this audiobook. We are planning that. So I'm very happy to be associated with that, and will let you know. So of course, we have the stages such as the revolutionary yogi, and the mother arrives. She arrived on 29th March 1914, which is a landmark shift in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. The yoga that was largely individual began to take a collective dimension with the publishing of the Arya, the monthly journal started by the mother and mostly authored by Sri Aurobindo. So I have a poem which I'll be very happy if Satya rendered it, called Light, which comes from this stage, which I mentioned, the mother arrives. And this is again a very well-known poem, and I'd love it if
yes, ma'am.
went to it.
Light. I'm sharing this in the chat box. Light, endless light. Darkness has room no more. Life's ignorant gulfs give up their secrecy. The huge inconscient depths, unplumbed before, lie glimmering in vast expectancy. Light, timeless light, immutable and apart. The holy sealed mysterious doors unclose. Light, burning light from the infinite's diamond heart. Quivers in my heart where blooms the deathless rose. Light in its rapture leaping through the nerves. Light, brooding light, each smitten, passionate cell in a mute blaze of ecstasy preserves a living sense of the imperishable. I move in an ocean of stupendous light, joining my depths to his eternal height.
Thank you so much, Satya. That was really amazingly rendered. Thank you for reading it.
Thank you.
So the other thing, after the mother arrives, I thought I will also mention the master of integral yoga in 1926. And the supermind began to draw closer and closer to earth, preparing it for a new realization, the supramental transformation. So the poem that we got from here, also mentioned in the book, is The Golden Light, but we will not read it. And there is this section and phase of his life where he had to deal with the ongoing wars, especially Second World War. And he wrote a poem in that time called The Dwarf Napoleon, which many of you may know, which was, hitting at Hitler that time, really. So, and of course, there is a phase of the Avatar and the Master of Integral Yoga. So these are the sections that, I picked up. And we have a God's Labor, which I thought Dr. Bellu Mehra could also read. We have some tracks that we have put in the audiobook called Lights of Lights, spiritual anthology of spiritual poetry edited by Vijay Pai. And we rendered it into audiobook, which is available for free download from Auro Publications site. So some of the tracks have been read by some of our reciters, but I think there will be definitely a time constraint. So I will request Beluji to kindly read God's Labor, a part of it. It's a beautiful poem, and it comes under the Avatar section of the book. I will show you the book. We're going to bring out an abridged version of this book called Sri Aurobindo's Life through his poems, compiled by and edited by Dr. Alok Pandey and published by Sri Aurobindo Society, specifically Pradeep Naranji. So, Belu, do you have the poem?
Yes, I have the poem, and I've also put it in the chat box. I think it's good that way everybody can also see. I haven't put the complete poem. It's a long poem, just a few stanzas. But I also just want to mention this book, Gayatri, as far as I know, it's just right now on limited publication. But I think we plan to do it on a bigger scale after the audiobook. Okay, so this is a beautiful, beautiful poem of Sri Aurobindo, and I'm really happy and grateful, Gayatri, that you've asked me to read. I mean, this is a poem I've read many times, but it's difficult to render visually. At least we are not ready at this point. But thank you. So, a God's Labor. I have gathered my dreams in a silver air between the gold and the blue, and wrapped them softly and left them there, my jeweled dreams of you. I had hoped to build a rainbow bridge, marrying the soil to the sky, and slow in this dancing planet midge the moods of infinity. But too bright were our heavens, too far away, too frail their ethereal stuff, too splendid and sudden our light could not stay. The roots were not deep enough. He who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay, and the burden of earthly nature bear, and tread the dolorous way. Coercing my Godhead, I have come down, here on the sordid earth, ignorant, laboring human grown, twixt the gates of death and birth. I have been digging deep and long, mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river's song, a home for the deathless fire. Thank you. Gayatri, you are on mute, please.
So I wanted to give you a glimpse of, other kinds of poetry that Sri Aurobindo also wrote, reflecting what was going on around him in his, indomitable style. So I'll just read a few lines from the Dwarf Napoleon, which I mentioned to you, which was written in October 1939. And it's a prophetic poem about Hitler. Many of you may have read it. It goes like this. Behold, by Maya's fantasy of will, a violent miracle takes sudden birth. A real grows one with the incredible in the control of her magician born. The small achieves things great, the base things grand. This puny creature would bestride the earth. Even as the immense colossus of the past, Napoleon's mind was swift and bold and vast. His heart was calm and stormy like a sea, his will dynamic in its grip and clasp. His eye could hold a world within its grasp and see the great and small things sovereignly. A moment of gigantic depth and scope, he seized and gave coherence to its hope. Far other, this creature of a nether clay, void of all grandeur, like a gnome at play. Iron and mud his nature's mingled stuff, a little limited vision brain, cunning and skillful in its narrow vein. A sentimental egotist, poor and rough, whose heart was never sweet and fresh and young. A headlong spirit driven by hopes and fears, intense neurotic with his shouts and tears. Violent and cruel devil, child and brute, the screaming orator with a strident tongue, the prophet of a scanty fixed idea, plays now the leader of a human march. His might shall build the future's triumph arch. So I thought, this is another way he expressed, and it's prophetic, whatever he mentions if you read the entire poem. So can I just then shift a little bit to what fascinates me about Sri Aurobindo is also a time in the 1930s till about 1938, there was what was academically called the Department of Poetry in the ashram. And many of you know that in it, many young and keen disciple poets took lessons in poetry under Sri Aurobindo. Some of the disciple students of the department, just to mention a few, were Arjava, Amal Kiran, Dilip Kumar Rai, Harindranath Chattopadhyay, Nishikantun, Nirod Bodhan, Themi, and many, many others. I may have missed some names. Please forgive me for that. And so they used to send their poetry compositions to him and he used to guide them. His comments and suggestions in pretty good detail, the turn of the phrase, the rhythm, the style, the image, the thought, and lines which had qualities, including their sources of inspiration and new possibilities of expression, made an elaborate attempt in bringing out the essential and necessary character of writing, moving towards inspired and inevitable utterance. So there are stories of how, these young disciples became poets overnight. They had no clue before. Some were doctors, some were from various other professions. So that was quite amazing. So we have many of these poets, poems recited in, again, the Light of Light. There is a Spotify link which I shared. I don't know whether it can be shared by Satya or, I shared. So some of you can take a look and listen to Sri Aurobindo's poems as well as these ashram poets. And I don't know how much time we have, but I wanted to also talk about how, coming from different areas of this country, sometimes we forget who really Sri Aurobindo was or is. We, coming from Bengal, I predominantly thought he was a revolutionary, which he was, of course, and a freedom fighter. But we were never told, or there was nothing to tell us much, that he was also such a great yogi, and his poetry was never, taught, or, nothing was there. And then if you look at the other side, many people on this side of the country may not know that he was such a revolutionary, and he was so prophetic, and he knew he was so deeply involved in the struggle, and his birthday falls on the same day, so he kind of brought about our independence. So I just thought I will kind of try and end this with one of my favorite poems, and I'm sure many of you also think that. So when he was cooped up in Alipur, I'll just read a few stanzas. In Alipur jail, during that, after the Alipur bomb case in the 1908-1910, I think, phase, he was convicted and of course later acquitted. And then he wrote Invitation. Many of you may have read Tales of his Prison Life, which has a lot of humor and the abysmal condition of the jail that was in. And this is what came out of him in the transformational phase of his life. So I'd like to kind of leave you, and maybe you can share, some of you can share your thoughts about his poetry. So what he writes in Invitation is, not in the petty circle of cities, cramped by your doors and your walls, I dwell. Over me, God is blue in the welkin, against me the wind and the storm. I sport with solitude here in my regions of misadventure have made me a friend. Who would live largely? Who would live freely here to the wind-swept uplands ascend? I am the Lord of tempest and mountain. I am the spirit of freedom and pride. Stark must he be, and a kinsman to danger, who shares my kingdom and walks my side. So some of you probably know it by heart, but every time I read this, I get goosebumps and I have to kind of read this. So if we can just look at the last slide, I just wanted to again, mention all of you. If possible, the 10th last slide, especially to Dr. Kiran Singh, Dr. Belumera, Vishwajit Mohapatra, who's been so supportive, and Satya also today, who's given so much time so that we can get it going. The last one, which is at the end. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And I think I'll end it. If anyone wants to say something or maybe even read a poem, that would be good. I don't know whether some of the tracks could be played, but if there is time, but
there is some time, but I think there may be some questions or comments, because I see Dr. Ravi Bhushan is also here. He's from literature background, and so I thought maybe he might have something to share. And of course, Kiranji is also from literature background, so they may have some insights or comments or questions. But I also just want to quickly mention one thing. There is Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine and Synthesis of Yoga and so much ideal of human unity and so much big books. And then we have like the poem Satya read. The image, the visual that he gives of psychic being, quivers in my heart where blooms the deathless rose.
yes.
I mean, yeah, you can read Synthesis of Yoga and Letters on Yoga, and then you can just, or you can just keep this visual, the deathless rose. What is this deathless rose? Quivers in my heart. So this is what I think the power of poetry.
Yes.
I mean, poetry and Sri Aurobindo's poetry in particular, like the other day I was thinking there is so much, I was talking to somebody about the whole idea of Murti Puja in Sanatan Dharma. And then I just thought of one little poem of Sri Aurobindo, the poem titled Form, where all the deeper philosophy behind Murti Puja is there in just few lines. Or the 4-line poem called God. Or, so yes, there is 24,000 lines Savitri, and then there are these little gems.
Yes.
Same thing with invitation. I mean, I read recently in Manoj Das' book, which is on Sri Aurobindo's pre-Pondicherry phase. Actually, Nolinida got, because he was also in the prison with Sri Aurobindo. And one day he conveyed a message to Sri Aurobindo that there is nothing good to read in the prison, of course, and where would I get something? And next day, Sri Aurobindo hands him this piece of paper with invitation written on it. Imagine. So, yeah, these little
So
things.
yes, that's what, when I first came to Pondicherry, I used to attend these poetry classes we have, Shushanta conducts. And that is what really connected me first. And that still remains with me. I've read so many other books, but this is what gets me directly to his vision of the soul's vision, it really puts me there. And he's also written some poems on the Vedantic visions that he's had initially, the stone goddess and so on. So it is really something special. As he says, it may not be too philosophical or intellectual, but there is this inner illumination. This is which comes from some other realm, which is not man-made. So that is the key that he did in his poetry, I believe.
That's the art. So Kiran.
Yeah, thank you, Gayatri ji, for bringing poetry. And this is not simply poetry, it is Sri Aurobindo's poetry. How beautifully you connect, you bring that essence of Sri Aurobindo's poetry in your own words also. So it was so beautifully recited and very, very meaningful. Sometimes you dive deep while listening to you, that how beautifully Sri Aurobindo takes us to the journey of inner light, somewhere in a presence. It is a kind of meditation. I always felt when we read Sri Aurobindo's poetry. Rather, it helps in discovering oneself. So naturally, poetry is kind of overflow. That is what we learned in literature, of powerful feelings. But here it is settled. It is like it comes from very, very deep within. It is not like a level of vital. It takes us to the much more. That is what psychic comes in. So it is so beautifully you have done. I wish and I like the style also, so that I wish we could all of us have recited one poem.
You can recite a poem.
I mean, if we will do it next time. That gave me idea that we would invite all the participants who are present here, and we'll request them. We would recite together. It's a different kind of journey we will traveling together. So thank you so much, Gayatri ji, for coming here. Thank you.
I feel it becomes a collective meditation when we do it together instead of
Right.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kiran, for
thank you so much.
Always, giving us so much space and opportunities. Thank you.
No, it's our own pleasure and honor that you are here and we listen to you. It's a virtual journey has done such a good thing that we could, without traveling so much distance physically, we can come and connect with each other, and particularly at soul level. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. I invite participants also if they want to share their views. I see Ushaben Patel for the first time. You are in Pondicherry, Ushaben, am I right? If I don't miss.
Yes, Ravi ji, I think.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Biluji, good evening, Kiran ma'am and Gayatri ji. It's such a pleasure listening to Gayatri ji on Aurobindo's poetry. I think it was like I was mesmerized when she was reciting and reading. No, I think I look at Aurobindo's personality as a poet in terms of he being a nationalist as well as a mystic. So I think it's a unique combination in that sense that somebody who represents nationalism and as well as the mysticism. I don't think there are other such examples. That's number one. Number two, when we look at or when we read Aurobindo's poetry, I think it's straight from the goat's mouth. As in orality, they say that an oral performer's mind is a bicameral mind. The first half of the mind, straight it's from the God, and the second half of the mind, like through that he or she communicates with the viewers or the listeners. So like when we read Aurobindo, I think that kind of a feeling comes to me, at least, that it's straight from the God's mouth, or from, and that's why we enjoy that divine anand, which is the ultimate thing which we get out of his poetry. When we read his the future poetry, that critique on Aurobindo's poetry, I think two sections on essence of poetry and sources of poetry, they clearly indicate that what is the quintessential element of poetry and what are the sources of poetry. Just a reference somewhere it is said that I think it's straight from Aurobindo's point of view that intelligence and imagination, they are not the true creators of poetry. Rather, they are just the instruments of poetry. The true creator is the soul, and so it's straight from the soul. And I think that's why poets were known as kavis. The real essence of being a kavi is, I think, something which is straight from the soul. And the last thing, I think, when we look at the sources of poetry, or you can say inspiration for poetry, I think for an Indian mind, this Saraswati becomes the source of poetry. I'm Saraswati not in terms of river Saraswati, but something which is in motion and divine motion. And somewhere Ganga becomes the real inspiration for a kavi to, compose poetry. So I think, Aurobindo gives us that wonderful perspective on what a kavi is and what are the sources of a kavi when he or she composes or writes a poem. So wonderful, wonderful listening to Gayatriji, and something so beautiful on Aurobindo's poetry. I think I was really enriched. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Very, very well said. Well put.
I think Raviji always bring a very beautiful perspective and a very intense perspective.
Thank you.
And
It's a learning
thank
experience,
you.
ma'am. It's a learning
You
experience.
enrich the sessions whenever you are, sharing your views.
It's my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
It's my learning. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's yeah.
Yes, yes. You go ahead, Beluji.
No, I think that's what makes these sessions so more alive and living for us, because we approach it with that attitude or this inner mindset of we are here to learn together, to take that delight together in Sri Aurobindo's vision and works, whether it's poetry, painting, architecture, whatever that might be. And I think I just wanted to say that Sri Aurobindo himself has said this thing, that yes, it's the Ganga which is the mightiest source of inspiration. Though Saraswati, the Saras is there, but what does Ganga signify? Straight from the lock of Shiva, that supramental, that inspiration, the sources that I think, Gayatri, you also alluded to. And I know we don't have too much time to go into detail of that, but the 4 levels that you spoke of, the higher mind, illumined mind, and up to the overmind. And then, of course, there is the supermind, but as Sri Aurobindo says, the aesthesis, overmind aesthesis. But if we can go deeper into what are those 4 levels of inspiration or 4 sources of poetry, we'll need much more than longer than an hour, but
yes, the future poetry is all about, who a poet is and what should be expected from a poet, he talks about, and I've read all that in other places, but I'm sure all of you know that. So we probably can have longer sessions and have more participants.
Yeah. Raviji, I think while listening to you and the little discussion, I was just wondering, I always, whenever I read Sri Aurobindo's poetry, I felt what state of mind he must be. कहाँ से लिखा होगा उन्होंने. For example, when I read Kabir, Tulsidas, or any Bhakta poet, or in Gujarati, Narsimha Mehta, Meera, it is always, it started journey like जैसे कि हमारे emotion को touch करती, somewhere, emotional level पे. And हमारी अपनी बात कहती है, ऐसा लगता है, where being human, we feel very, very much connected what they are saying. And श्री अरविंदो की जो शुरुआत की पोइट्री थी, वो उसमें वो था, मतलब I could connect, जहाँ वो थोड़े से revolutionary touch लाते हैं. But when we come to this kind of poetry which Gayatri ji brought it today, I feel वो शायद वो बहुत different zone में बैठकर उन्होंने लिखा होगा, because वो नॉर्मल ह्यूमन बीइंग से मतलब इमीडिएटली नहीं हम जाते हैं उसके साथ. ऐसा लगता है कि उससे पहले हमें मेंटली तैयार होना पड़ता है, इमोशनली तैयार होना पड़ता है, एंड देन ग्रेजुअली अगर आप कनेक्ट हो पा रहे हैं, जैसे मेडिटेट अपॉन आप खुद अपने आप को तैयार करते हैं, जो इनका इंटीग्रल योगा कहता है, तभी आप उसको छू पाते हैं. अदरवाइज शब्दों से नहीं पकड़ पाते आप उनको. So that is what, even today when Gayatri ji, you were reading your own and as well as Sri Aurobindo's poetry, I was feeling how the first question came into my mind, why Aurobindo left out in our, normal education books in a way, when he is writing so well. I mean, it is some limited word I'm using so well. And why we are able to go so much deeper into it today, when we are reading and reciting and we feel that we are in a. So for that we have to prepare ourselves to understand or to get into that Aurobindo's poetry. That is what I felt, because while reading bhakti poet, you just go, I mean, and you may come out also easily, possibly, because we have heard Meera's bhajan, we have sung Meera's bhajan, and we came out also. But in Sri Aurobindo's poetry, when you go deeper into it, it is difficult to come out. So, I mean, come out the level which we are living in. It again, pulls in rather than remain on the same surface. That is what I have experienced. I felt like to share, Gayatri ji, in front of you, that this is what I felt.
Compels you to come back to him. Everything returns to him or the realm that he's writing from. So I think the education people find it very difficult. Probably they don't understand. So it should have been part of the syllabus, and we should have read his poems. We should read his poems in schools and in colleges, I feel. That's
so maybe Ravi ji, पोएट्री का रसा स्वादन करते हैं नॉर्मली. सो ये श्री अरविंद की पोएट्री का रसा स्वादन से ऊपर है क्या? क्या हम उस लेवल पर क्यों नहीं रसा स्वादन कर पाते हैं? हम सारी थियरी लगा देते हैं पोएट्री को समझने के, लैंग्वेज ले आते हैं, उसके सारा ले आते हैं, और अरविंदो की कविताएं आप इस लेवल पर नहीं समझ पाते हैं. अगर शब्दों में पकड़ जाएंगे तो खत्म हो जाती हैं. तो लगेगा कि ये हम उस लेवल पर नहीं पहुंच पाते जो हम नॉर्मली कविताओं को, जैसे काव्य क्या है और कविता को कैसे आनंद लिया जा सकता है, उस लेवल पर हम शायद श्री अरविंदो की कविताओं को उस लेवल पर नहीं समझ पाएंगे. दैट इज व्हाट आई फेल्ट. So maybe, next session we can do that.
Certainly, true. But I just want to share one thing, because see, this is the uniqueness of Aurobindo. In the true sense, is a mystic.
Yeah.
Even like I hardly find people, at least in my circles, studying or researching on Aurobindo as an academic or as a poet as such. We made an attempt in my university. Like we introduced him even in our PhD programs. One of our, like at least two of our students, they're doing their PhD on Aurobindo. And even in recent PhD viva voce, it was on Tagore and Romarola, that French philosopher. During the discussion also, when they were talking of oceanic sensibility and human surplus and that internationalism and then superhuman, Vishwamano, Vishwasahitya, a discussion of Aurobindo came during that viva voce itself, that do we have such examples like nationalism and mysticism coming together in one person as such, and that gets juxtaposed so beautifully that one gets merged into it. It's an immersive experience as such, as you said, right?
Yeah.
And the last thing, I think even Aurobindo also somewhere said, I think we write poetry, we take pleasure in poetry. Maybe there are three perspectives: poetry from heart, poetry from intellect, and poetry from intuitive intellect.
Yeah.
So that the third one is preferred as far as the poetry of soul is concerned, I think. So, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I think there is another thing. Some of the, the educational policy decisions probably were also shaped by the politics and the discourse of the times in which our educational curriculum were being laid out. So without going into that, there is another important, which I find is like, in Sri Aurobindo's, and I think as Gayatri also alluded to in her presentation, these are in a way autobiographical poems. I mean, these are his autobiographical accounts, whether it is invitation while he's cooped up in a little solitary cell, he's inviting people to go on this adventure of consciousness, not just Nolinida for whom he wrote the poem, but for generations together. So he's, heralding the call. So, and I just thought like, this poem, A God's Labor, I just read out a few lines, but there are two stanzas which I read out, which totally bring the avataric work for which Sri Aurobindo came. And how could our educational policymakers look at this and think of it, whether to categorize it as nationalist, mistake, this, in which box they will put it. So the lines, he talks about, he who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay. The whole philosophy of avatar itself is, embedded in these two lines. And the burden of earthly nature bear and tread the dolorous way. And then he says, again, the autobiographical work comes in. Coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on the sordid earth, ignorant, laboring, human grown, twixt the gates of death and birth. And if you keep reading these poems, his and mother's supramental yoga, the work they were doing together, is the labor of gods that they were engaged in. So I can't imagine our Kothari commissions and all these other commissions looking at these poems and thinking, our students can understand what avatarhood means by reading such an autobiographical account. It would not have gone into the secular box. So, it's easier to bring in the mysticism of several others, but not someone who is grounded in the very Sanatan tradition as such. So, I mean, I'm just being not totally speculative, but reading into the way our policy works. So, yeah, but things are changing. And I think this 150th year has, I mean, it's good to know that even in universities where Raviji, you are teaching, things are changing. Things have changed in, certainly in MSU. We have a professor, in fact, Gayatri was part of a webinar we did, a 2-hour thing on Sri Aurobindo's poetry. And we had an English professor from Baroda, MSU, who was talking about what he brings in, as a student of Sri Aurobindo and as a devotee of Sri Aurobindo, what he brings in at the university there. And in Pondicherry University also, I think in the English department, there is more and more of bringing in Sri Aurobindo's poetry. So we can hope that future generations will have it a little easier. So yeah, but this is very good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. So thank you, Gayatriji, for being with us. And we will keep on inviting you because it is always pleasure. And for me, poetry is very close to my heart. So Biliji rightly said.
I think you are very close to Bhakti poetry. We can do something.
Yeah, certainly. Please. Thank you. Biliji, over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Gayatri, for taking us on this journey of, going into Sri Aurobindo's poetry. And as Kiranji said, we have just started. So maybe we'll have a little more discussion. And
I also suggest maybe we can have something for children, maybe, or a younger age group. We can have students, participating or bringing in, reading his poems and have that kind of thing. That would also be a good thing to do.
That's pretty good idea.
Yes, yes. So Kiranji, you have to come back to India and organize these things.
Yeah.
So,
After December, we'll plan one session with students.
Yeah, I think this will be very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So. And who knows, there might be budding poets among the students. So Yeah, that would be great.
And devotees.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll meet next week
Thank you.
in another session. Thank you, Raviji. Thank you.
Thank you so much.